Hey everyone, this is Justin from Who Is Like You Ministries, and welcome back to another video. Now this week I thought I would do kind of a different type of video than I usually do or plan on doing on this channel. I'm going to do a review of the Prince of Egypt movie that was made back in '98. Now this is an animated version, and I think it is a really great and faithful adaptation to the story of the Exodus, so I just want to preface this whole video with saying that I absolutely love this movie, and I think it does a very good job to the story of Moses, to the story of the Hebrew people, and to the Exodus itself. I am going to go through and talk about some of the inaccuracies or the differences, and sometimes I'll even go through some of the parts that I think are really well done. But of course, like every movie, some things had to be taken out, some things are different, they had to change things for the story, so I'll go through with that with you guys. But overall, I absolutely love this movie. It's one of my favorites overall. I think the soundtrack is simply amazing, and there are some parts in the movie that I think the animation is just extremely well done. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, I do want to start by saying that this movie does take place during the Exodus, chapters 2 through 15 of the Bible, and the first point of the differences that I want to start with is when Moses is put into the basket, and then he goes down the Nile and is picked up by someone from the Pharaoh's household. So the first point I want to make of the differences between the movie and the Bible is with this scene right here, where we see the Pharaoh's wife in the movie coming down to the water, and she sees Moses in the basket, and then he becomes her son. The Bible version is a little different, however. In Exodus chapter 2, it's actually Pharaoh's daughter that comes down to the water and rescues Moses. And the movie does a very good job of showing how Moses' sister Miriam is watching from a little distance away. It doesn't really show it in the movie, but in the Bible, Miriam walks up to the Pharaoh's daughter and asks if the daughter wants her to go and find a Hebrew mother to nurse Moses, because he won't take, according to Josephus, he won't take any of the Egyptian breasts. So the daughter agrees, and Miriam actually goes and finds Moses' mother, Yocheved, and she nurses Moses all the way up until he can be weaned off, and then Moses is given back to the daughter to become her son. So that's just a small thing that the movie doesn't include that the Bible has. Another interesting point is actually with Moses' father. Now the movie makes no mention of him at all, and even the Bible, he's sparsely talked about, I think 3 or 4 times. But anyway, his name is Amram, and he's actually a Levite. So, just a fun fact for you guys, that Moses' father is named in the Bible. His name is Amram, and he is a Levite.
Hey, Ramesses! How'd you like your face carved on a wall? Someday, yes!
Now I want to talk about the dating of Exodus. Here we see in the movie, Ramesses is Moses' brother, and historically it would have been Ramesses II, and their father, the Pharaoh of the Hebrew oppression, would have been Seti I. Now the movie is using the late dating of the Exodus, which occurred around 1290 BC, give or take. And there are a great amount of scholars who accept the late dating of Exodus, but the vast majority of scholars actually accept the early dating of Exodus, which is around 1440 BC. And the Pharaoh of the Hebrew oppression would have been Thutmose III, and the Pharaoh during the Exodus would have been Menephis II. So there is a difference here. The movie version uses the late dating, which technically isn't wrong, but most scholars agree with the early dating. Now, Before I move on to my next scene, I will make a longer, more in-depth video on the dating of Exodus, but I'll just give a brief overview here. Another point that I want to make is the relationship that we see between Ramesses and Moses in the movie. In the movie, they're portrayed as brothers. They're as close as you can get. They're loving. They would do anything for each other. And actually makes for a really good conflict that they use in the movie. And it adds some more plot points, as if, the regular story of the Exodus didn't have enough conflict and plot already. But in reality, the Bible doesn't give any kind of relationship that Moses would have had with the Pharaoh, either Ramesses or Amenophis. Most likely, though, it would not have been a relationship like portrayed in the movie. It probably would have been I don't want to say a hostile relationship, but it definitely wouldn't have been a good one. And then when I get on to the scene where Moses kills the Egyptian, I'll give more evidence as to how the relationship between Moses and the Pharaoh probably wasn't a very good one. But before I get to that, I actually want to talk about Zipporah, Moses' wife, that'll come up here in a minute.
Why do the gods torment me with such reckless, destructive, blasphemous sons?
Now, before I get to the Zipporah point that I wanted to make, I do want to make a quick stop at this scene because I think it is just so awesome the way that what Seti says to Moses and Ramesses, and to be honest, I might say it to my kids one day.
My Lord Pharaoh, I propose that the high priests offer tribute to their new regent.
An excellent idea. Okay, point.
Boy. The Midian girl. That's a good idea.
Go get her.
By the power of Ra, we present for your delectation and delight an exotic apparition stolen from faraway land.
So now I want to talk about Zipporah, Moses' future wife. Now in the movie, she's introduced a little bit differently than she is from the Bible. In the movie, Moses is in Egypt when he meets her and she is a captured slave, and then he goes on and marries her eventually when he flees Egypt and finds himself in the land of Midian. In the Bible, however, in Exodus, the later parts of Exodus chapter 2, Moses doesn't even meet Zipporah until after he's already left Egypt and he finds himself in Midian after he rescues Jethro's daughters. So there's a little bit of a difference there, but not a huge deal. Also, it's worth noting that Moses' children aren't mentioned at all in the movie, and Moses did have a few children in the Bible. One specifically at this time, Gershom, is mentioned by name, but they don't really do anything in the Exodus event, so there's really no need to mention them, and they're very rarely mentioned in the Bible's version of the Exodus story anyway.
Stop! Stop it! Leave that man alone!
Moses!
So the next thing I want to mention is right here when Moses kills the Egyptian. Now, in the movie, Moses kills the Egyptian because he's whipping and torturing another Hebrew, and it's pretty much the exact same in the Bible. However, in the movie, Ramesses sees it right there, and then Moses tries to flee from Egypt out of guilt because he just murdered someone. And Ramesses says that he is the Pharaoh, he can make it go away, he can make it so Moses is innocent and erase that event from history. And then Moses runs from Egypt, and the movie brings up another conflict where Ramesses has no idea what's got into Moses, and it brings kind of like a brother-to-brother conflict there. In the Bible, though, it's a little bit different. Now, this adds evidence to my point that Moses probably didn't have a very good relationship with the Pharaoh, because when he kills the Egyptian in the Bible, he tries to cover it up. He buries the Egyptian under the sand. And then it's not clear if the Pharaoh was there during the event like the movie, but the Pharaoh does hear about it in the very next verse. and actually seeks to kill Moses, and that's why he flees Egypt. No doubt there was some guilt there, but for the most part the Bible says that he flees Egypt because the Pharaoh sought to kill him. So there's a little difference there, and there's no brother to brother conflict there. It's just the Pharaoh immediately seeks to kill Moses. And then that's what leads him to Midian, and that's where he meets Zipporah. And I do also want to stop at the scene of the burning bush, because I think it is very well done, and it quotes a lot from the Bible. And of course they had to take some things out for the runtime of the movie, but I think it is very well done, and there's actually a small story that I want to tell when it gets to the part in the scene.
Take the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground.
Who are you?
I am that I am.
So here, I just want to make a small mention. It's pretty much the same as in the movie and the book, and like I mentioned earlier, they do take a few things out. But right here, where God asks Moses to take off his sandals, I believe it was about a year ago, I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 years ago, I did a study abroad program for my university at Oxford over in England. And it was for my Christian university, my seminary. And we went to a chapel one of the days, and one of the professors actually did a sermon, and he used this very scene from the movie and from the Bible as part of his sermon, talking about how God asked Moses to take off his sandals because even though the sandals were only a couple inches thick, it was still too high for God. Moses was still too high up, and he needed to take off his sandals and humble himself. And that was a really powerful sermon that he did, and I'm very grateful that I got to hear that from that professor. Also, it's important to note that it's in this scene that we find out that God wants Aaron. Well, he doesn't necessarily want Aaron. Moses begs for God to find someone else to do the speaking, and God tells Moses that Aaron will be the speaker, Moses' brother. So that's different from the movie. In the book, Aaron does quite a few of the plagues actually on the command of Moses. And in the movie, Moses just does everything, does the speaking, does the plagues, does everything. So that's one of the interesting differences, and it's actually a pretty important difference because it sort of limits the role that Aaron plays in the movie.
The Prince of Egypt.
Ramesses, in my heart you are my brother. But things cannot be as they were.
I see no reason why not.
You know I am a Hebrew, and the God of the Hebrews came to me.
What?
He commands that you let his people go.
Commands?
Behold, the power of God.
So here's another interesting point. Now, in the movie, Moses goes and talks to Ramesses by himself, or I think Zipporah is there as well. In the book, however, in Exodus, I believe it's chapter 7, Ramesses, or Amenophis, depending on the Pharaoh, is confronted by Moses and Aaron, not just Moses. And it's actually Aaron who turns the staff into a snake, unlike the movie. And then another interesting thing is that during this scene, and during the whole Exodus event and all of the plagues, Moses was actually 80 years old and Aaron was 83. So the movie doesn't exactly omit that he's 80 years old. It just doesn't really show it. He looks a little young to be 80, but that's how old he was during the Exodus event. And while I'm on the subject of Aaron doing a lot of these miracles, he actually did a fair amount of the plagues as well. So he turned the staff into a snake. He turned the Nile into blood, he called frogs from the Nile, and he did the gnat plague. So that's a pretty good deal that the movie omits and just makes Moses do it all, which I understand why they do it, but it's not 100% biblically accurate. It's also interesting to note that the reason that Aaron does some of these plagues is because in Exodus chapter 7 verse 1, God tells Moses that Moses will be like God to Aaron, and Aaron will be his prophet. So that gives you a little bit of insight on the role that Aaron is going to play and the role that Moses is going to play. Another interesting difference is, you can see it here in this scene and almost all of the other scenes where Moses talks to Ramesses. In the movie, Moses tells Ramesses to let the Hebrew people go permanently. That's what he's wanting. Let my people go. In the Bible, however, it's a little different. Moses starts with asking if Ramesses or Amenophis will let the Hebrew people go so they can sacrifice to their God in the wilderness for a few days. And that's all that he's been asking the entire time that the plagues are happening. In the movie, it's just a flat out let my people go, and in the Bible, the people don't permanently get to go until the very last plague. So that's just a small difference. I see why they did it in the movie. It actually, movie-wise, it's a little better the way they do it, but biblically, Moses and Aaron are asking for the Hebrew people to go and sacrifice to their God. All of the Hebrew people, including their livestock, their flocks, and their herds. So this is another point I want to make. So in the movie, we see all of the plagues in a really awesome montage with an epic choir, and it's really just an awesome scene, and I really love the song. An interesting thing to note is that, in the movie we just see the montage. In the Bible, these plagues happen over the course of a couple weeks. And actually, on 4 occasions, the Pharaoh asks Moses to relent from the plagues, and he will let the Hebrew people go and sacrifice to their gods. He does it 4 times. And then all 4 of those times Moses cries to God and asks him to stop whatever plague it is, and he does. And then the Pharaoh hardens his heart, and then he lies to Moses, and he refuses to release the people. So that's just something that happens in the Bible. It's not shown in the movie. Not a huge deal because this scene is just so epic, I'm willing to overlook it. So here, I want to talk about the pillar of flame that we see here. So in the movie, we see the pillar appear when the Egyptians change their minds about letting the people go and start to pursue them to kill them and possibly enslave them again. In the Bible, however, I believe it's Exodus chapter 13 and 14, we see, actually it might even be 12. Anyway, we see that the pillar is actually there the whole time. It's by day it's a pillar of cloud, and by night it's a pillar of fire, and it leads the way to the promised land, to the Red Sea. So it's just a very, very small, minute difference.
Seeking faith and speaking words I never thought I'd say. There can be miracles when you believe.
And then the last thing that I want to mention about this movie comes at the very end, and it has to do with the Song of Moses, which is Exodus chapter 15. Now, when we see it in the movie, It's the When You Believe song. It's supposed to be the song of Moses from Exodus 15. It's placed in a different spot than it is in the Bible. In the movie, the song happens right after Pharaoh agrees to let the people go and they start leaving Egypt, right before they're pursued by the Egyptians. In the Bible, however, they don't start singing until after they've crossed the Red Sea and the Egyptians have been destroyed. So it's just a very small thing. It works in the movie, but in the Bible it's just in a different spot. And then, as an ending note, I do want to mention that in the When You Believe song, the Hebrew that they are singing comes from Exodus 15, and it's verses 1, 11, and 13. And I'll go ahead and tell you what that Hebrew is and then what it means. So in the Hebrew part of the song, it reads, Ashira la Adonai ki ga'o ga'ah. Ashira la Adonai ki ga'o ga'ah. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Mi chamocha nedar ba'kodesh. Nachita vechastecha am zu ga'alta. Nachita vechastecha am zu ga'alta. And then Ashira, Ashira, Ashira. Now, that Hebrew translates to, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Who is like you among the gods, O Lord? Who is like you in majestic holiness? You have led the people in your steadfast love, whom you have redeemed. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is my review of The Prince of Egypt, and I just want to say again, I absolutely love this movie, and I think it's very well done. It's very close to the Bible, and the music is better than epic. It's pretty glorious, to give it a good word. And I think it does a lot of justice to the story of the Hebrew people and the most important event to the Jews in their history. So thank you guys for watching. This has been Justin from Who Is Like You Ministries, and I hope you have a great day.